I had $43 left in my account and 9 days until my next paycheck. And the worst part? I had just sent money for the third time that month. He hadn't even replied yet. I remember because I had just sent money to someone for the third time that month. And I was sitting on my bed, in the dark, phone in hand, telling myself it was fine. It was not fine. My account showed $43 and some change. And for the first time, it didn't feel okay anymore. Not until next Friday. Not for the weekend. For the next 9 days. $43. After rent. After the grocery run I had skimped on. After 2 months of telling myself I'd start saving next month. And the person I had just sent money to? He hadn't even replied to my message yet. I sat there for a long time, just staring at that number. And something cracked open inside me. Not dramatically. Not like a breakdown. More like a very quiet, very honest question that I had been avoiding for years finally made it to the surface. Why do I keep doing this? Not to him. Not to them. But to myself. Why do I keep choosing everyone else's comfort over my own survival? That question took me down a road I wasn't ready for. Because the answer wasn't about money at all. Not really. It was about something much older. Much quieter. Something I had been carrying so long I had forgotten it wasn't just part of who I was. This is that story. 3 months before that Thursday night, I had overdrafted my account for the second time in a year. Not because of an emergency. Not because something broke or I got sick or lost my job. Because I had sent $120 to a friend who said she needed help with her power bill. And I had forgotten that my car insurance was scheduled to come out that same day. $27 overdraft fee. On top of the $120 I had already given away. I remember the bank teller explaining it to me. Very kindly. Very patiently. And I just nodded and said thank you and walked out and sat in my car for a few minutes before I started driving. That should have been the moment I stopped. That should have been the scene in the movie where the main character wakes up. But I didn't stop. I called my friend and told her what happened. And she said, "Oh no, I'm so sorry. I'll pay you back as soon as I can," and something about those words just made me feel okay again. Made me feel like it was worth it. Like the discomfort was just the cost of being a good friend. I drove home and moved on. And a month later, I did it again. That's the thing about patterns. They don't feel like patterns while you're inside them. They just feel like life. Let me tell you a little bit about my life at that time, because context matters. I was 31. I had a stable enough job, administrative coordinator for a mid-sized company. Not glamorous. Not high-paying. But steady. About $52,000 a year before taxes. I lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment that I genuinely loved. I had built it into something that felt like mine. Plants on the windowsill. A good coffee maker. Bookshelves I had assembled myself. And I had people. Good people, I thought. My younger brother, Marcus. My best friend since college, Diane. And a man I had been seeing for about 8 months named Corey. Marcus was 26 and had been bouncing between jobs since his last layoff. He was smart and funny and I adored him. He just couldn't quite get traction. He'd start something would go sideways, and he'd be back at square one. And when that happened, he called me. Diane was in a long, complicated on and off relationship with someone who wasn't good for her. Which meant she was often emotionally raw. Which meant she sometimes needed things. Sometimes material things. And Corey. Corey was charming. Genuinely charming. The kind of person who makes you feel like the only person in the room. He had a vision for himself, a business idea he was always 5 months away from launching. He didn't ask for money directly. Not at first. He just talked about how hard things were. And I listened. And I helped. Because that's what you do when you love someone, right? That was my world. And I want to be honest with you, I loved these people. I still love some of them. This isn't a story about bad people. It's a story about a pattern. About how generosity can quietly become something else without you ever noticing the shift. Let me show you how this actually looked. Not in general terms. In specific ones. It's a Tuesday in February. Marcus calls me at around 7 p.m. I've just gotten home from work. I'm still in my coat. He opens with a question I'll hear 50 more times in different forms over the next 2 years. Hey, are you in a place to help me out a little? He needs $200 for a deposit on a new apartment. His current roommate situation had fallen apart again, and he'd found a place, but needed to secure it by Friday. $200. I had $411 in checking. I had bills coming up, but 200 felt survivable. I told myself I'd just be careful the next 2 weeks. I sent it within 10 minutes of hanging up. He texted back immediately, "You're literally saving my life. I love you so much. I'll pay you back end of the month." End of the month came. He didn't pay it back. I didn't mention it. He called again the following month with something else. That was the first $200. It didn't feel like much, but it was the beginning of something. May. I'm at my kitchen table eating dinner and Diane calls, crying. Not soft crying. The kind of crying that closes your throat. She and her boyfriend had gotten into a bad fight. She'd left. She was at a gas station around the corner from his place, and she needed money to get an Uber back across town to her sister's. She'd left her wallet. $40. That's all she needed. Just $40 to get somewhere safe. I sent it before she even finished the sentence. But then, and this is the part one held on to, she stayed on the phone with me for 2 hours after that. We talked the way we used to in college. About everything and nothing. About life and dreams and what we really wanted. At the end she said, "I don't know what I'd do without you. You're the only person I can always count on." I went to bed that night feeling full. That's the only word for it. Full. Warm. Important. And that feeling? That was the real reward. Not the money, the connection. August. Corey and I are 8 months in. We're at dinner at a restaurant he chose. Nice place. Candlelight. The kind of place where the menus don't have prices on the woman's copy, which, trust me, is its own kind of warning sign. We're halfway through the meal when he gets quiet in that particular way he has. Jaw tightening a little. Eyes somewhere else. I ask what's wrong. He says nothing, it's fine. I push gently. He sighs. He says there's a vendor he needs to pay to hold a contract for his business. Just $800 to lock it in for 60 days. He's waiting on an invoice to come through. He'll have it in 2 weeks. But the deadline is tomorrow. $800. I said yes. I don't even think I paused. We finished dinner. I paid for that too, and when we got back to my place I did the transfer from my phone while he sat on my couch looking grateful and relieved. And here is what I remember most clearly about that night. Not the transfer. Not even the amount. But the way he looked at me afterward. Like I was capable. Like I had just solved a real problem. Like I was the kind of woman who showed up. That look. That was worth $800 to me. 2 weeks came and went. The invoice he mentioned was delayed, he said. Then delayed again. Then the contract fell through. Then we stopped talking about it. $800. Gone. And I told myself it didn't matter because we were together and things even out over time. That was the most expensive lie I ever told myself. That night cost me $800. But the truth is, it cost me much more than that. I want to stop the story here and tell you what was actually happening inside me. Because if you've ever been the person who gives and can't quite stop, I think this part might be the most important thing I say in this whole video. I grew up as the oldest of 3 kids. My parents worked constantly. They were good people, hardworking, loving in the ways they knew how. But they were also stretched thin. And somewhere between being 9 and 12 years old, I became the one who kept things together. I made sure Marcus did his homework. I was the one my mom called when she needed someone to pick up my little sister from school. I learned early that being helpful meant being loved. That being needed meant being important. And more than that, I learned that when I helped, people stayed. When I showed up with solutions, relationships felt secure. Psychologists have a name for this. It's called earned attachment. It's when a child learns that love isn't freely given, it's earned through behavior, through usefulness, through sacrifice. And the child internalizes that lesson so completely that by the time they're an adult, they don't even realize they're still operating from it. I wasn't sending Marcus $200. I was sending $200 worth of please don't leave me. I wasn't staying on the phone with Diane for 2 hours. I was spending 2 hours collecting evidence that I mattered. And with Corey, I was paying $800 to feel chosen. None of that was conscious. I want to be really clear about that. I wasn't calculating anything. I genuinely thought I was just being a good sister, a good friend, a loving partner. But the emotional economy of all of it, what I was spending and what I was getting in return, was completely out of balance. And my bank account was just the physical record of that imbalance. There's a concept sometimes called a giving compulsion. It's not generosity, exactly, or it starts as generosity, but morphs into something else. It's giving driven not by genuine desire, but by fear. Fear of being unloved. Fear of being seen as selfish. Fear of what happens to the relationship if you say no. I was giving out of fear almost every single time. And it cost me far more than money. I want to show you the numbers. Not to be dramatic, but because I think seeing them in one place is important. In the 2 years between January of my 30th year and December of my 31st, I tracked, as carefully as I could, what I had given away to the 3 main people in my life. Marcus, over the course of those 24 months, I sent him money on 14 separate occasions. Some small, $40, $60. Some significant, $200, $300. The total was around $2,400. Almost none of it was paid back. Not because he was dishonest. He genuinely intended to. But good intentions and an unstable life do not always produce repayment. Diane, harder to calculate because it was more mixed in with just friendship. Dinners I paid for. Ubers I covered. The time she needed a new phone and borrowed $300. Roughly $1,100 across that same period. Corey, $4,200. That number still makes me sit still for a second when I see it. The $800 I mentioned was just one transfer. There were others. A car repair. A phone bill he couldn't make. A flight I bought so we could go somewhere together because he said he'd pay me back for his ticket and then didn't. Total, across 2 years, approximately $7,700. $7,700, that's not just money. That's security. That's peace of mind. That's a future I never built. On a $52,000 salary, after taxes and rent and living expenses, that is not a small number. That is the emergency fund I never built. That is the IRA I never opened. That is the trip I kept saying I'd take someday. But the financial cost goes deeper than just the money I gave away. Because while I was giving money to other people, I was also not doing certain things for myself. I wasn't contributing consistently to my 401k beyond the minimum. I didn't have a single month's expenses in savings. Financial advisors often recommend 3 to 6 months as a baseline. I was one medical bill away from serious trouble. And that trouble, when it eventually came in the form of a car repair I couldn't absorb, went on a credit card with 19% interest. The debt I accumulated trying to stay afloat while still giving, because I couldn't stop even when I knew I should, cost me another $2,000 in interest over the next 18 months. Add it all up. The direct giving, the opportunity cost, the interest, the missed savings. We're talking about somewhere between $10,000 and $12,000. In 2 years. That is money that could have changed the shape of my life. And I gave it away chasing a feeling. Looking back now, the signs were obvious. They were there the whole time. I just didn't want to see them. The first one was the cycle. Every person I was giving to had a pattern. It was never one request. It was always one, then another, then another. Marcus's, just this once, became so reliable I started half expecting the call at the end of each month. Diane's crises followed a rhythm. Corey's business was always 6 weeks away from not needing my help anymore. That cycle, The predictable return of the need is a sign that you're not helping someone through a hard moment. You are financing a lifestyle that isn't changing. And those are very different things. The second warning sign was how I felt when I said no on the rare occasions I did. There was one time Marcus called, and I genuinely had nothing to send. I told him honestly that I was tight that week. And he said, okay, and we hung up, and I spent the next 3 days with a low-grade anxiety I couldn't shake. This vague sense that I had done something wrong, that I had let him down, that maybe he was struggling and I could have found a way. Normal generosity doesn't feel like that. Guilt of that intensity over a single no is a signal that something deeper is driving the behavior. The third warning sign was the secrecy. I didn't talk about how much I was giving. Not to anyone. Not to Diane, who didn't know about Corey's transfers. Not to Marcus, who didn't know the full picture of my finances. When you're doing something that you instinctively hide from the people closest to you, it's worth asking why. I think I was ashamed. Not of being generous, I was proud of that. I was ashamed of how much I needed the feeling it gave me. And the fourth warning sign, the one I want to name clearly because I think it might resonate with some of you, nobody was asking how I was doing. Not really. Not consistently. There was a lot of you always come through, and I don't know what I'd do without you. But very little, how are you doing? How are your finances? Are you okay? And I normalized that. I told myself it was just how things were. That I was the strong one. That strong people don't need to be asked. But everyone needs to be asked. That Thursday night in November. $43. 9 days. I sat there for a long time before I did anything. And in that stillness, something shifted. Not a dramatic realization. Not a lightning bolt. More like, the silence finally got loud enough to hear. And that's when I did something I had never done before. I opened my transfer history. I had always processed each transaction individually, in isolation, so the full picture never formed. That night, I scrolled back. 6 months. 12 months. 18 months. And I watched the number add up. At first, I felt defensive. These were emergencies. These were people I loved. These were real needs. But then I scrolled back to Marcus's section and I counted 14 transfers in 2 years. 14. And I thought about how I had described each one to myself at the time. One-time situation. Just this once. He's going through a rough patch. The rough patch had lasted 24 months. That's when I noticed something I couldn't unknow. The money I had sent to 3 people in the last 2 years, I could have used it to eliminate the credit card debt I was carrying. I could have had a full emergency fund. I could have had the start of something real. And I hadn't. Because I had been too busy being the person everyone needed. I put my phone down. I lay back on my bed. And I asked myself a question I had never thought to ask before. When was the last time someone took care of me? I lay there for a long time trying to answer it. The real test came about 2 weeks after that Thursday night. Corey texted. He needed $300. Just to cover something short-term. He'd explain when he saw me. And for the first time, the very first time in 8 months, I didn't respond immediately. I put the phone face down on my desk. And I sat with it. I thought about the $800. The 2 other transfers. The $4,200 total. I thought about the vendor contract that never materialized. I thought about the dinner I had paid for while he looked at me like I was capable. I thought about all the times I had told myself he was just going through something, that the business would take off, that things would balance out. And I thought about $43. 9 days. I picked up the phone and I typed, "I'm not in a position to help right now. I hope you find a solution." And I sent it. 12 minutes went by. Then he replied. Not, "I understand." Not, "No worries, I'll figure it out." What he actually typed was, "Wow, okay. Good to know." Followed by nothing. For 3 days. And that silence, that particular cold silence, told me everything I had been refusing to know. Because when you say no to someone who genuinely loves you, they are disappointed, but they're okay. They figure it out. They come back. They don't weaponize their disappointment. But when you say no to someone who has been with you primarily for what you provide, they disappear. Or they get cold. Or they make you feel it. That silence was the most honest thing Corey ever gave me. It answered a question I had been paying to avoid asking. Corey and I ended about a month after that. Not dramatically. It just dissolved. And I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. It did. But the hurt was different from what I expected. It wasn't devastating. It was more like putting down something heavy I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. Marcus called the following week. Same request, different framing. I said I couldn't right now. He was quiet for a second and then said, "Okay, love you." And we talked for 20 minutes about his life and mine. That conversation, just a conversation, no transaction, was worth more than any of the money I'd sent him. Here is what I came to understand in the months that followed. I had not been giving money because I was generous. I had been giving money because I was afraid. Afraid that if I stopped being useful, I would stop being loved. Afraid that no meant abandonment. Afraid that my value to the people in my life was contingent, that it was earned, every single month, by what I could provide. And that fear, that old, childhood-shaped fear, had been running my finances for years. The saddest part isn't the money. The saddest part is that I had been working so hard to keep people close, and in doing so, I had made it almost impossible to know who actually was. Because when you pay for people's presence, you never find out if they'd stay for free. There's something else I want to say, and it's the thing that took me the longest to accept. Some of those people loved me. Marcus genuinely loves me. Diane, in her own limited way, loves me. What I had done to those relationships, by making myself the constant provider, wasn't malicious. But it was still harmful. Harmful to me, yes. But also harmful to them. Because when you always bail someone out, you are quietly communicating that you don't believe they can figure it out themselves. You're not treating them as capable adults. You're treating them as problems you need to manage so that you can feel needed. Real love, the kind that helps people grow, sometimes looks like stepping back. Like letting someone sit in the discomfort of their own situation long enough to find their own solution. I had never given Marcus or Diane that. I had always arrived too quickly with the answer. And in doing that, I had made their dependence worse, not better. That realization didn't make me feel good. But it made me feel awake. And awake, even when it's uncomfortable, is better than the alternative. I want to talk about what I actually did differently. Not in a here's the 5-step system way. Just honestly, in the way I actually lived it. The first thing I did was build something I should have built years earlier. A 1-month emergency fund. My goal was to get 1 month of basic expenses, rent, utilities, groceries, minimum bills, sitting in a separate savings account that I did not touch. It took me about 5 months to get there because I had to build it slowly while also paying down the credit card I had accumulated. But I got there. And the day I looked at that account and saw the number sitting there, untouched, just waiting, I felt something I had never felt before in my financial life. I felt safe. Not rich. Not sorted. Just safe. And that feeling, it turns out, is something you can build. It doesn't require a huge income. It requires consistent decisions over time. The second thing I did was create what I think of as an intentional giving budget. I didn't stop being generous. I don't think I'd know how to do that and still be myself. But I decided in advance what I could give each month without hurting my own financial health. For a while that number was very small. $50. Some months, $0. And I made peace with that. Because giving from empty isn't generosity. It's just a different kind of debt. The third thing, and this was the hardest one, was learning to feel the discomfort of saying no without immediately trying to make it go away. Because that impulse, the need to fix the uncomfortable feeling of having disappointed someone, that was the engine of the whole pattern. The guilt, the anxiety, the fear of disconnection. If I could sit with that feeling for a few hours instead of reaching for my phone, most of it passed. And the times it didn't pass were the times I went for a walk or called a friend, not to ask for help, but just to hear a familiar voice. That sounds small. It wasn't small. Learning to tolerate the feeling of having let someone down without catastrophizing, without reaching for my wallet, that was genuinely one of the hardest things I've ever done. And then there's the longer financial road. The things I'm still building. I started contributing to a retirement account consistently, even in small amounts. Something I had put off for years because there was always something more urgent. Something human and present and asking for help. And I had to make peace with the fact that my future self is also a person who needs and deserves protection. I know that sounds abstract. Future you. But future me is real. And every time I chose someone else's comfort over my own future, I was making a choice on her behalf that she never agreed to. I want to end this somewhere honest. I am not fully healed from this pattern. I don't think you fully heal from something that started when you were 9 years old. I still have the reflex. I still feel the pull when someone I love is struggling. I still sometimes give a little more than I should. But the difference is that now I know what I'm doing when I do it. I know when I'm giving from genuine love and when I'm giving from fear. And that awareness doesn't always stop me, but it slows me down. And slowing down is everything. If you recognized yourself anywhere in this story, in the giving, in the need to be needed, in the $43.09, I want you to know something. You are not weak. You are not stupid. You are not broken. You are someone who learned a long time ago that love had to be earned. And you have been paying for it ever since. You are allowed to stop. You are allowed to keep the money. You are allowed to be the person who gets taken care of sometimes. You are allowed to say no and still be a good person, a loving person, a person worth being around. Your value is not in your bank transfers. It never was. Start building for yourself. Slowly. Without guilt. One quiet decision at a time. Your future self is already grateful.